maybe we should get started. What would you say, dear colleagues? Maybe it is about time. So let me start and open this important webinar today. I'm very pleased to welcome you from the International Association of Universities side and to partner with the European Women Rectors Association for a webinar that will allow to tackle issues pertaining to the broader theme of tackling the leaking pipeline in academic leadership. And we will discuss how higher education can support gender equality. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Kirsten Tam, who's the president of the European Women Rectors Association, and as well the rector and president of Malmö University in Sweden.
Thank you very much, and very welcome to this webinar hosted by EWORA and IAU. And this is during the International Women's Week, so it's very important this week, I think. And today we will focus on how universities can contribute to narrowing the gender and equity gaps within academia, but also in society. And I'm the new president of EWORA, and our board has an ongoing discussion right now about how we can inspire women in their early career development in academia, and especially also after their PhD and forward to become full professors and perhaps deans and vice chancellors, since there is a need of more women rectors in Europe as well as in the rest of the world. And we are also discussing how we can take the point of departure in human rights and link gender equality and diversity to leadership and academic careers. And I think there is a need of also value-based leadership in the world right now. And one way of establishing a more value-based leadership is to learn about human rights and to incorporate this research-based knowledge with leadership development. And during fall, EWORA will come back to you to present and discuss our strategy and plan for EWORA, and based on what we have achieved so far, of course, but also based on research and facts. Julia, the EWORA Secretary General, will soon also present some facts and figures, and there is also need of more research in this area. And I have been the rector for Malmö University more than 8 years now, and will end my position as a rector in July this year. And during these years, the university has focused on building equal academic career paths, and now 37% of our full professors are women. However, in basic education, 2/3 of our students are women, which means that which should be better reflected in the group of full professors. And this means that we need to continue the work on gender equality. And Malmö University has also, together with one medical university, Karolinska Institutet, and one technical university, KTH, in Stockholm, been responsible for a national program conducting a survey on gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the Swedish higher education sector. And if you're interested in reading the overarching report from Sweden, it is available on Karolinska Institutet's website, but we can also distribute it from here. And the overall goal of the national study was to establish research-based knowledge on the prevalence and consequences of gender-based violence and sexual harassment in academia among students and staff, to form a basis for the development of prevention and support models and methods. However, how can universities contribute to narrowing the gender and equity gaps and share the knowledge, experience, and research there is in this field? Today at this webinar, we will share some thoughts and examples of good practice and experiences from different institutions in different countries in the world. which we hope could be inspirational to others, to you at the webinar. And again, very welcome to this webinar during the very important International Women's Week. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, for opening up the webinar with these important words. And indeed, you focused in particular on value-based leadership, the importance of value-based leadership, and also on the new strategy and plans for EWORA. And if you have anything you would wish to share also in the chat, I'm sure that people will definitely wish to read those, including the report that was adopted in Sweden. So thank you for that, and very pleased to have this joint event today.
Yeah.
I'm now pleased to pass the word on to Inga Zelenine, who's the Vice President of the International Association of Universities. But before that, she actually is the rector of Nicolas Ramirez University, and she's just been appointed for a second mandate of 5 years. And warm congratulations to you, Inga. And you're also very much involved in EWORA there as well, in the leadership. And so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hillage, dear participants, dear colleagues. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome all of you gathered today to this important joint webinar of International Association of Universities and European Women Rectors Association. In a few days, dear colleagues, we will celebrate International Women's Day. And women worldwide have come a long way in their struggle for their rights. But it is still concerning to see that in many countries, including those that officially celebrate 8th of March, women's rights are not respected. We as university leaders have the responsibility to put in place policies that actively encourage and support staff in various stages of career paths and professional development. The situation in many countries today highlights the fact that in the absence of democracy, women must fight for their civil and political rights to influence government decisions. And unfortunately, even in modern
there is an issue with the internet connection, Inga. I see that the image is frozen. I'm very sorry about this. This should not happen, of course, today, but maybe we get back to Inga in a few minutes. She may wish to get out of the session and back in. So in the meantime, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Julia Kaglayan, who's the General Secretary of EWORA. And in particular, you will be able to present some figures that will help put some backdrop to our discussion. So the floor is yours, Julia.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see my presentation right now. Well, thank you again. And I also would like to thank the International Association of Universities for this great collaboration. I also would like to welcome all participants. I will be briefly reviewing the facts and figures regarding the career progression of women in higher education. So let's start with a global perspective. We see that women enter tertiary education with a percentage of 52. However, the challenges come up as they move up to higher academic positions. As clearly seen in this figure 1 by UNESCO, there's a significant decline in women's representation as they move from master level to PhD level. There are also field-specific imbalances we should mention, as highlighted by various reports in this area. Specific obstacles are still persistent in STEM fields, and this is also reflected in research and innovation sector. Women constitute only 13% of all inventors in the world. Now, let me move to the European level, and I will be showing some numbers from SHE figures published by European Commission every 3 years. Here again, very similar to global trends, we see that women outnumber men at master level. However, as they progress, the gender balance decreases. Grade A is the highest academic grade in a typical career, which is equal to full professorship. And women only constitute 26.2% of full professors across Europe, which is a very low representation. Here, I would like to also briefly mention that, of course, this data vary from one country to other country, and there are good practices. Countries such as Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Latvia, Lithuania, and Hungary, some examples. These are the countries have the highest proportion of women representation at this level. So it's also important to understand the cultural differences. Now I will move to the STEM areas again, very similar to the global trends. Once again, women are significantly underrepresented throughout Europe in this STEM areas. As you see, gender gap widened much more when we especially compare to the previous figure. European Commission emphasized the need for initiatives to promote gender diversity in STEM. And also they recall this special need for women in higher education leadership. Women only constitute 23.6% of heads of higher education institutions, which is a significant gender disparity in leadership positions. Here we have again good practices from the countries such as Latvia, Sweden, Iceland, Lithuania, and Belgium. And I will be concluding in a minute, but before that, I would like to pay your attention to the improvement. There is an improvement, although it's a slight one, especially when we call back SHE figures 212. The proportion of women heads of higher education institution was only 15. So from 15 to 24 almost, there is an improvement. This is also reflected in grade A positions. So the Commission acknowledges this slight improvement. Another figure, another graph is coming from European Institute for Gender Equality, again compatible with this improvement I mentioned. As you see here, the women's representation at the top levels of National Academies of Science. From 2017 till now, there is an improvement. And here we also have this data at a country-based level. And we have again good practices from Ireland, Netherlands, and Sweden. They almost reach gender equality at this very specific data. So it's important to work further on cultural differences, cultural comparisons among countries, maybe in future meetings. So I would like to conclude to say that Leaky pipelines are clear. Women are dropping out at various career stages, and this is also impacting the very low representation at the leadership levels. And even gender disparities extend beyond academia. The gender inequalities are affecting all of us. Gender disparities are manifesting in different ways, in every sector, in every aspect of life, and we need collaborative efforts from individuals, communities, organizations, countries. And our role, the European Women Rectors Association's role in this picture, is to recognize the importance of diverse representation at top management levels. I would like to wish all participants a very nice International Women's Day on Friday, and I would like to thank you all for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. These figures are absolutely essential, and thank you for having been able to present them in such a succinct yet very clear manner, because it shows indeed the leaky pipeline and how it impacts all of us, as you said rightfully. Very interesting also to hear where this pipeline is leaking when it comes to the STEM or research and innovation, when it comes to certain grades in university universities and how actually women are very much present in large numbers, as Kirsten Tam mentioned earlier, at the initial levels of the education ladder. And then as time moves on and education is offering other opportunities, women are no longer there when it comes to the higher level. What is very interesting as well is the examples you gave of countries where the situation is different. And that as well is will merit further investigation for many, I believe, and will be interesting to look at. So if you can as well in the chat share some of the links with the participants, that will be very good for them to look into more deeply. I'm afraid that our dear rector from Nicolas Romero's University is not yet getting back into the webinar. There must be a real technical issue. She made some important points, however, also moving up to the 8th of March and the International Women's Day, where she underlined in particular that there are many issues when it comes to women's rights, to professional development, to the issue of democracy, and how the absence of democracy often is a barrier to opportunities for women to have the right to actually play their full part in society as equal citizens and taking part of the overall development of a country. So I think those points that she managed to make at the beginning of the webinar are very important. If she comes back later, we will certainly give her the floor. So let me share also just a few slides just for the sake of our conversation here. Let's see if this is indeed the right one. And can you see this? Yes. So what we're talking about indeed is the leaking pipeline in academic leadership. So and how this is informed by the academic pathways of individuals when they are in higher education. And so I will just add a few notes also from where we stand as an international association of universities and how we can contribute to this. Julia, you made some excellent points already as to where EWORA makes the difference and also contributes to rethinking the position of women in leadership and how to actually improve it from an association point of view. And the IAU is trying to do the same by bringing around the table each and every time possible leaders from higher education institutions from around the world and the other higher education stakeholders to discuss the future of higher education. So where we actually have the opportunity to bring together our members, 600 members in some 120 countries, we also reach out to 20,000 higher education institutions through the web. And that piece of information is interesting because it allows to actually share information like the recording of this webinar, and to share that at the global level for people to pick it up and hopefully also to trigger further conversation in their own institutions and settings. We advocate a lot for the many principles, values, and the values-based higher education that Kirsten Tam also alluded to in her opening remarks, where we advocate to the UN, to UNESCO, but also to European bodies like the Council of Europe, or in the Americas with the Organization of American States, with the Arab Association of Universities, or the African Union. So we work with many different players around the world to always look at what are the different settings in which the challenges appear and what are the solutions that are being developed around the world. This we translate into research, monitoring, evaluation, publications, and networking. But what is most important is this networking between associations, and here between EWORA and the IAU for this session. So we definitely have the same dynamic that you described, Kirsten, that we really want to promote the values upon which to develop the kind of higher education that will help the many to thrive. So it's academic freedom, institutional autonomy, it's quality in teaching and learning and outreach, appreciation of diversity, ethics and integrity, but it is also equity, solidarity, cooperation, and global responsibilities towards all the communities. So we wish to generate and disseminate the kind of knowledge that we can share here on screen to create new insights. And we already thank all the speakers for the insights they will share. And we hope to thus be able to identify new sustainable solutions to issues that are very relevant locally, but resonate with global dynamics as well. So the backdrop of all this discussion today is also the UN 2030 Agenda, Transforming Our World, and the 17 SDGs. They are kind of a framework for higher education institutions around the world to look at social transformation and how, looking at the different dynamics within the Sustainable Development Goals, we can also look at how to transform education in its full breadth, teaching and learning, research, community engagement, campus operation, and engagement with society in general. There's a statement at the back or as a backdrop to this webinar today. And the statement has it that higher education institutions do educate the citizens of today and the leaders of tomorrow. And that sometimes is even challenged when it comes to assessing the role of higher education in society. But we really want to emphasize also that part. Universities have a strong role to play. They can play that role. And in educating citizens, they have an opportunity to really develop a different future for the many. So we look at leadership for today, and we look at how it can inform tomorrow and how they can then also help develop the kind of competencies that citizens need to act at the local level and also at the global level. So the backdrop for this webinar is maybe to link all the SDGs, but more specifically SDG 4, quality education, 5, gender equality, 10, reduce inequalities, but certainly 17, partnerships. They are very important. So the guiding questions for today, you have seen those when you registered for the event, but they are really, what are the challenges still today that remain for gender equality in academic institutions? What are the invisible barriers, or what is this notorious glass ceiling that still prevents women from progressing to senior positions? We will hear from the speakers some ideas about what these challenges are and how possibly to address these. And the bigger question is also, can universities contribute to narrowing the gender inequity gaps? And if so, how would they do that? So we will hear some examples. Then what is the responsibility of university leaders? Do all leaders see that they have an opportunity actually to put in place these policies that will encourage and support staff in career development, in professional development, in uptaking new positions that are possibly out of reach if they're not supported by the leadership? So if they have that opportunity, do they also see this as a responsibility? And here we have a few higher education leaders with us in the session, also among the participants. So some examples will be shared from the participants from the speaker side, but we also strongly advocate for the audience to share information in the chat and links to initiatives that are being developed in different parts of the world. So as a backdrop, to just add to your figures, Julia, the World Higher Education Database that we maintain as an IAU also maps the reality when it comes to the engagement of women and men in higher education. And here you have a quite telling picture of the differences around the world, but also the number of women considering the number of institutions around the world. So in Asia, there are over 7,000 higher education institutions listed in the WED, and only 870 are women, counting on women leadership to change the higher education system and landscape for the future. In Africa, there are some 1,500 universities and other higher education institutions, and 117 leaders of universities are women. In Europe, the situation is slightly different, yet matches the rest of the world. I would dare say there are 3,752 higher education institutions, only 796 women leaders, and in the Middle East, 1,129 higher education institutions listed in the WED. There are some more. The private sector is not fully mapped in the WED, but still, this is the public and not-for-profit sector that counts the numbers, and 47 are women leaders. So without further ado, you heard some introductory words from Kirsten Tam, Inga Zalenyene, and Julia Kaklayan, including myself. And I'm now very pleased to give the floor to our esteemed speakers, and I will start by giving the floor to Marisa Richmond, who's a professor of history and women's and gender studies at Middle Tennessee State University in the USA.
Good morning. I hope everybody can see and hear me. This is morning here in the United States. It's also our spring break week. Here in the United States, of course, we have a unique system of government where our federal government, and then we have state governments. And while the federal government technically reigns supreme, state governments have a lot of leeway and a lot of powers to do things. And many of our universities, excuse me, are specifically run and managed and funded at the state level. And it's very uneven what's happening around the country. And I happen to live in a state, Tennessee, that is currently putting higher education, or education in general, but higher education in particular, under assault. And that threatens the opportunities for women to advance within higher ed. We have a federal law called Title IX, dating back to 1972, which bans sex discrimination in all levels of education. But it's been a really a boon to opportunities for women in higher ed. Our state government is looking to cut funding for higher ed, including cutting off federal funding. And currently, the state of Tennessee gets $2 billion from the United States government. And under Title IX language, the non-discrimination policies with regard to sex or gender apply if they get federal funding. And if we cut off federal funding, that means there would be no further federal enforcement. And so we're very alarmed at talk within our state legislature about cutting off federal funding. And this would affect, again, budgets across the state at all levels, but particularly here in higher education. Furthermore, this week alone, our state legislature is looking to eliminate non-discrimination policies and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at our higher education institutions. Just a couple of days ago, the state of Florida eliminated its DEI programs and fired the entire staff. And so we're alarmed by that status and concerned about the legislation that's happening here in Tennessee and in similar states that would eliminate these programs. Those non-discrimination programs have provided opportunity for women, especially women across the board from all categories. And these DEI programs are important to help identify those gaps and those disparities so that we can address them. If we're not even looking at those numbers, we can't begin to address them in the first place. And then, of course, here in the United States, we had a huge controversy just a few months ago, or a few weeks ago, where a congressional investigation targeted 3 female presidents. One in particular stands out, Claudine Gay at Harvard University, which happens to be my alma mater. Harvard is often referred good or bad, as the nation's leading university. But particularly, Dr. Gay, being a Black woman, she was now showing that African American women can move up the ladder and become leaders in our leading institutions of learning. And she was targeted by Congress and basically forced out of that position. In the University of Pennsylvania, another Ivy League school, also saw their president targeted, and she too was pushed out and forced to resign. And so we're concerned about targeting women who do reach these highest levels of education, especially presidents, and in particular with Dr. Gay, the issue of race, an issue that we're still struggling with in the United States, really predominates. And a lot of people across the board, even outside of academia, are asking a very basic question. Would this have happened to a white man? Would a white man have faced the same scrutiny, and would a white man have been forced to resign, saying the same things and doing the same things that Dr. Gay was accused of doing? And so we're looking at these issues, we're looking at these problems, and again, this is going across the board. Of course, Harvard is a private university, not a public university, and so but even donorship, we're understanding, is down. Whether it's not clear how many people are withdrawing money because of either the controversy surrounding Dr. Gay or the fact that she was forced to resign. Some people are offended over that. And certainly as an alumni, I am. I want to make sure that fellow Black women have an opportunity to move up into professorships, department chairs, deans, and of course, eventually, university presidents. And so these are some of the things we're dealing with here in the United States. And I want to be mindful of the time and make sure we leave time for our full discussion and Q&A. So I thank you for your attention, and I turn the floor back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marisa Richmond, to not turn around the pot, as we say here, but to go straight to the very important discussion and the issues that you face in the US. And it has also made the headlines around the world. And that's important because it needs to be discussed. It needs to, this very worrisome situation needs to be unpacked in many different forms and shapes, and see what the reasons are, and how it would have translated indeed if white men would have sat in the same position as Dr. Gale at Harvard or at the other universities that have been targeted. So it's interesting when you get through the pipeline and then you get to the other side. I think the position is a very complicated one. And certainly not easy to keep when you're a woman. So another big topic that you actually put on the table, but we will have an opportunity to discuss these further in the Q&A time. Patricia Ruiz Bravo Lopez, may I give you the floor? You're the director of the UNESCO Chair on Gender in Higher Education Institutions at the PUCT University of Peru. And so thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Do you hear me?
We hear you, but since your camera is open twice, maybe we need to close one, and we will see if we can help with the echoing.
Hello, okay, it's okay. Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking EWORA and IAU for inviting me to participate in this panel. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to share the stage with colleagues from different parts of the world and learn about their experiences. I sent a PPT, a presentation, if it's possible to show, because my connection is not well. For that, I prefer that I don't know if Isabel or Maggie can present.
I'm afraid that if you send it to Isabel, she called in sick since yesterday morning, so we do not have the presentation. But Meg
Meg.
will try and share, so she will try and share.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This is for helping us because my English is not so well. I apologize, but I will try to do the best. I began. The organizers have presented us with two questions. How can universities contribute to narrowing the gender gaps, the gender and equity gaps? And second, which examples of good practice from your institution could be inspirational to others? To answer these two questions, it's important to consider two elements of the context in Latin America that I believe also affect other parts of the world and are potent threats to progress in gender equality at the societal level. First, okay. The second question, okay. This is as I said, to answer these two questions, it's important to consider two elements of the context in Latin America that I believe also affect other parts of the world and are potent threats to progress in terms of gender equality and the societal level. First, a conservative offensive that infiltrates a society, and the second, particularly at the universities, a neoliberal offensive at the university. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. A conservative offensive that infiltrates governments and spreads through churches and state institutions. This is a problem in Latin America and in Peru, because these conservative offenses warning about the dangers of a gender approach to national and personal development. It's argued that the gender approach undermines the family, promotes abortion, and seeks to homosexualize and confuse young people. In Peru, for instance, sexual education and the gender approach in basic education have been eliminated thanks to congressional legislation. Recently, there has been a proposal to change the name of the Ministry of Women to the Ministry of the Family, thus reducing the focus on women to their role in the family. And this is a big problem because it's in the different levels of the society. And the second, the next, please. The second is particularly in university, there is a presence of a neoliberal offensive that emphasizes hyper-productivity, hyper-competitiveness, and individualism. The notion that the future depends on personal effort and individual achievement undermines collective ideas and the pursuit of the common good. In this context, struggles for gender equity lose relevance as structural factors of gender inequality, structural factors of gender inequality are not acknowledged, and the gap is attributed to the perceived lack of effort and commitment from women. These two threats affect institutions as these tendencies are embodied in teachers and authorities who hinder proposal and advancement in terms of gender policies. That means that in terms of institution, we have in Peru, but also in Latin America, two threats a level, societal level. The conservative ideology of con mis hijos no te metas, and the neoliberalism in the university that threats the collective ideas. The next. Having said that, and acknowledging both as two important factors to consider in analysis and action, I will now answer the questions posed. To reduce equity and gender gaps, it's important to consider the following actions. We, in our university, we have this experience. Institutionalize the gender approach through gender policies. Then we can talk about this, but we have advances, but also problems, dilemmas. Second, develop specific policies for teaching students and staff. Third, implement a gender cross-cutting approach in the curricula. Create a gender office that oversees policy compliance, conducts studies to update demands, and has the capacity to influence decision-making at the highest level. This is very important because the authorities, they are not compromised with the gender approach. And gain support from both internal and external sources for new practices and funding. Also, it's important to develop a critical mass of teachers with an international, intergenerational, and interdisciplinary emphasis. It is key to form them and commit them to fight for equality. To achieve this, it's important to offer courses on topics of interest to students to engage them with these issues. For example, last year, a course on love and society was taught in the social science department. However, it was attended by students from various disciplines with whom curricular work continued, culminating in a colloquium where they presented their research. The result, an increase in engaged students who acknowledge power dynamics in romantic relationships. That means that we try to gain students to our cause, because in some cases the students are not committed with the gender approach. Finally, establish national and international cooperation networks that allow for support from academic teachers and research in course design, as well as participation in research and conference. The experience of other colleagues, such as those in this webinar, always generate new ideas that allow for policy and practice innovation. The next, please. An example of good practices, and it's my final. The first, I think, the critical mass of teachers. In 1990, we begin with a master of gender studies, and we form a lot of students and teachers. But this is very important, because if you don't have the support of another teachers at the university, the problem remains, no? And one interesting experience was established last year. The gender office designed a funding competition with funds provided by the academic vice president, to which various faculties could apply to develop gender mainstreaming proposal in their units. The competition sparked interest from 5 faculties, which formed teams and devised strategies to incorporate gender into different activities for teachers and students. What's interesting in this case is that a core group of teachers has been formed in each of these faculties who are interested in the topic of and with whom other activities will begin to be developed. One of the initial activities is related to March 8th. This is how progress is made with support from within. And another strategy is mentorship program within Emily's project. The mentorship program is very interesting. The idea behind this program is for experienced teachers to support novice teachers to build and reinforce new leadership. Many women, when they start out, feel the loneliness of power, which causes them to withdraw and prevents the formation of new generation. The mentorship aims to showcase opportunities to present research, connect with research groups and networks, and collaborate on research and intervention projects. Subsequently, collaborative training in management, exercise, and power would follow. The mentorship yielded significant results in the pilot experience, but unfortunately, it has not been replicated, at least to my knowledge. This is the link for the experience of a mentorship program that I think is very important for the formation for new leadership. Well, thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Patricia. I think your English is just marvelous, and you put on the table many points of importance here in the conversation. And you also gave very concrete examples of what to do about this. And it will be interesting to see maybe in the next round at the Q&A, what other examples specific to the Pontifical Universidad Católica del Perú you would have to share as well with the audience in complement of this. Maybe on just one thing on the leadership dimension, that's where we want to also come together with EWORA and see what kind of mentorship, leadership programs we could develop moving into the future, and how also from the more European perspective of EWORA, the European Women Rectors Association, we can, together with the IAU, create a global platform that will allow for this international mentorship, because I think that you really emphasize the importance of such initiatives. And it should also be mentorship for men leadership, I think. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Louisa Morley, Emeritus Professor at the Centre for Higher Education and Equity Research, SHEAR, at the University of Sussex in the UK. And we look forward to listening to the points that you will make and contribute to the discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from the UK. I'm going to present a few ideas very briefly from my recent book, Queering Higher Education. And before I start, I just would like to highlight 3 points I've picked up from the previous speakers, which have really resonated with my analysis, my thinking. One was Kirstin's observation about the need for values-based leadership. And this has been an argument that I have shared for many decades now, that leadership has to be about values, not bodies. And counting more underrepresented groups into organizations should not be an end in itself. Okay, so there's a big question there, I think, about what are we asking women to lead? And does the presence of a minority in any particular role, does it actually change the culture of the organization? Or are we getting into the ontology as epistemology two-step? The belief that just being something means that you do things differently. So I would really, really challenge that question. The other was from Maria's observation in the States. And we're all, watching the States very carefully in Europe, because what happens there today frequently happens in Europe tomorrow. And there's the whole issue about intersectionality that is often overlooked in the thinking about leadership. So, and I'm not just talking about race and ethnicity, which are incredibly important, but the class system as well. And that often it's much, much easier for people who have been socialized to the notion of entitlement to lead to enter leadership positions. So we do need, when we're talking about gender, to think about intersectionality, and not just as a buzzword, but as a theory and a methodology. And then the wonderful contribution from Peru, which again raised huge issues about the rise of the new right globally. Remember, I'm from the UK. I grew up under Margaret Thatcher, who was the first ever woman prime minister. She did absolutely nothing for women, and her policies made life a lot worse for a lot of women. So if we look around the globe, there are so many now right-wing women leaders in France, in Italy, Sweden, all many of the countries that have had decades of equality legislation. And we have fought to create space for leaders, and many right-wing women have entered, and they do not have a policy agenda to empower women. On the contrary, many of their policies work against the interests of women. So we do need to bring in a whole range of factors. Okay, next slide, please, Meg. I'm going to start with a whole range of provocations. I know I don't have long, but I would like to really start with this question about, does the leader's sex make a difference in the way a university is managed? And this is fundamental to my analysis, to my thinking. Or are we simply counting more women in to organizations in which they have to conform and reproduce, ventriloquize, mimic dominant neoliberal values? I'd also suggest, can I have the next point, please, Meg? That's it. I'd also ask questions about whether heteronormativity is an unmarked norm and primary mode of citation embedded in the gender and leadership scholarship. Now, I've been looking at this literature for decades, written reports, directed research projects, etc. I'm pretty familiar with it. And so much of the explanatory variables this debate relies on very heteronormative constructions of women. That women all live with men, women do all the share of the domesticity, women do all the majority of the childcare, etc. So it often presents a very normative, very conventional, very traditional identity for women. And it's not always in tune with all the changes in our lifestyles and how all the different forms of relationship that exist nowadays. So we do need to think about how norms are getting embedded in the debate. And the fact that the Leaky pipeline itself is a very linear narrative. It's a very rational, it's a trajectory that goes from A to B. And we know that it's not that simple. It's not that simple. I would also question, this is another provocation, does the debate on whether women lead differently rely on outdated gender binaries, essentialization, and homogenization? So what I mean by that is there's quite a strong argument in a lot of the literature to suggest that if you have women leaders, the culture will change because women are better at communication, they're more people-oriented, their interpersonal skills are more refined. No, I would dispute that. I would dispute that totally. But there's this idea that somehow this is all innate and that all women are the same, that we will all work in the same way. Next point, please. Now, I started my equality career in the 1980s, and I was working for the Greater London Council as part of the Equality, Equal Opportunities Initiative, which was a global leader in policy, embedding equalities policy in local authorities. It was a global leader. And the first point we were told to take into account was not to equate, not to conflate equalities in employment with equalities in service delivery. So there's still this belief in a lot of the leaky pipeline discourse that if you increase diversity, you'll automatically change workplace culture. Next point. So I would ask a question here. What's the assemblage of norms, environments, social structures, affects, and subjectivities that are entangled in the performance of leadership legitimacy? So what kind of authority sticks to different bodies? And do women have to mimic white male ruling class dispositions in order to be allowed to enter and stay in leadership positions? Next slide, please. Okay, there's been a lot of talk in the last few years about the conflation of sex and gender. And I'm constantly asking this question on to various projects, to various theorists, etc. When we talk about gender-based violence, what counts as gender? And do we fall into the trap of using the two terms interchangeably? How do we differentiate between sex and gender? Next point, please. And a major question, I would say it's not just about counting more women in, but asking a different question. What is being led? What are we asking women to lead? And to whom does authority stick? And that is where I would say we really must get a very strong intersectional analysis, because it does not stick to working class communities. It does not stick to ethnic minority communities. And there have been some very high profile cases in Britain where women leaders, rectors, vice chancellors, whatever you call them, got to the top of their career, top of their institution, and have been sacked. And the slightest thing they did wrong was all over the media. And it relates very much to the Harvard case, that you don't have to do very much if you don't have an entitlement to be there. So I would also say, instead of just looking at quantitative change, we need to problematize the concept of leadership itself, even the distributed variety. Is it leadership of fantasy? Is it an affective fiction that the right individuals can fix and make everything orderly? All we need is to get the right person in the right position and everything will be fine. We've already heard about the turbulent policy context in different countries. So it's not just about individual skills and dispositions, it's about the context and the values. Next point, please. I would go even further than saying, well, let's count more women in. I'd say, why is anything associated with biological sex? disciplines, dispositions, etc. And Julia's very helpful statistic talked about STEM, for example, but we all know that STEM statistics vary enormously around the globe. And when I was speaking in Abu Dhabi, and there were all these speakers from around the world presenting statistics from their countries on the underrepresentation of women in STEM, and the women in the Middle East were perplexed. They said, well, that's not the case here. Thank you very much. We've got a very high participation rate of women in STEM. So, you know, it is very culturally specific. And I think we have to really question why any task, job, disposition is associated with one biological sex or another. Next point, please. So I know we only have a short time today, but I would say there are some questions here. How do we disorder, disrupt, dismantle binary and normative logics, the binary about men and women? How do we disrupt that and carve out a minority space for all marginalized communities? Next slide, please. And if you'd like to read a little bit more about this at your leisure, here's the information about the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Louise, for living up to the expectations and asking the right questions. Very good. And also, you already gave some hints as to which question we could pick up in the next round on, and in particular, your last point. How can we disorder, disrupt, dismantle the discourse and really get to a point where we will find the solutions to the issues that we face? Very important point on numbers. Indeed, it's not by changing the numbers that we will change anything, not the least society. So we need much more understanding on the different dynamics underlying this dichotomy between, on the one hand, trying to get more women in, but then what and how. A warning point that I really resonates with what you said earlier, and also on different occasions from what I could read, is the importance of the kind of women leaders that we get in, because if it is to have a future of right-wing leaders on the women's side, that will certainly not help the world. Anyways, this is not yet the Q&A. I would like to give the floor to you, Maria Lantz. You're a adjunct professor at the Faculty of Culture and Society at Malmö University in Sweden. But you're speaking from Lamu in Kenya, in the east coast of Kenya. I see that your picture is blurred, and I just hope that your camera is not frozen, but that you will be able to present the points that you wanted to also contribute to this conversation. So Maria Lantz, can I invite you to take the floor?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So the challenges I was speaking about is both from within universities and from outside. And what you were saying before about being punished in media, I know all about it. And that was really both from conservative men and women. But anyways, what we can use in order to strengthen ourselves and also to connect to society is to remind ourselves about the Magna Charta that I think all of us have signed. And there are some very important sayings in that, independable, and there will be therefore greater understanding. And also that there are sites for free inquiry and debate. And we also need to remind ourselves that these fundamental ideas are there for us and for the universities. But the question is if this is enough, because even if we have signed this, our politicians haven't. So in Anna Lindh Academy, that has been running at the Malmö University since 2014, we're now doing a relaunch. We're reaching out to society where we also give courses for all leaders within and without the academy based in human rights. And why is this? Well, the Human Rights Declaration is definitely a living document, and we're not saying it's perfect, but it's there, and most countries in the world have signed them. So the target groups for within the public and nonprofit and private sectors, and those working as academic leaders. So we do try out a method where we use storytelling and cases. And me myself, I'm an artist. I've been running an art institution, a university for 12 years. And I see that there is a lot within the arts that we can pick up and use in order to train empathy by looking at art and by investigations of dilemmas that relate to human rights. So how are we doing this? Well, we could say that we have a case here where we have Beata. She's a senior lecturer. She's politically engaged, maybe within gender issues, whatever. And then she has a superior, the head of department, Christopher. And he's very afraid of this because he also knows that there might be a cut of funds if she keeps, going out and protesting, because some people may take offense. And then there is also Christina the Dean, and her story is also about this fear of funding cuts and, what would people think, and then who is right and what should be done. And I'm sure you all know these situations where you have someone who is very outspoken about something and other people are very like, is she really doing that? Since she is a teacher, shouldn't she keep her mouth shut? And. So with these kinds of examples, we would have leaders think about them and arguing, in different ways, but also make use of the articles in the human rights. So and we can also use art, like if we use Article 15, where it says everyone has the right to nationality and the freedom to change it. How does that, play out if you look at an artist as Larissa Sansur, who's really playing on this in her very funny work in the video essay, A Space Odyssey, where she is the first female astronaut landing on the moon, but she has a Palestinian flag to put there. And I know this is super sensitive these days, but I still think by using art, we could sort of be more, we don't have to take a stand. We can look at art and learn from art and start thinking together. In Article 16, it says in the human rights that marriage should be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. And we can look at art, for example, the artist Jack Louis David and the abduction of the Sabine women from 1799. This is the story that goes back even to the founding of Rome, where the men from two communities were fighting over women. And the women said, no, you should not fight over our bodies. We should make the decision ourselves who we want to belong to. So in short, I would say that art is very much connected to human rights, and we can use art within education, within assembly, association, with also looking at the press, freedom of speech, etc. So if we look back on the case I was presenting, we have Christina the Dean and Christopher, the head of department. They were actually very wrong if we look at both Bologna and the human rights, because university is a site for free inquiry and debate, but also in the human rights, it says that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. And so no one should hold that against Beata, even if it's painful. So by using human rights, we could actually help Christina and Christopher to do the right thing and to help them stand up against others who would say you should act and go against it. One last slide, this is a very funny one, I think, but I would like to encourage all female leaders, especially within academy, to watch Star Trek Voyager, because the Prime Directive is very much like the Human Rights Declaration. It has 47 points. And Captain Janeway is the first female captain on a starship in the series of Star Trek. And every episode is a dilemma for her. And by watching this and see how she argues, there is actually a lot to learn, and you can laugh at the same time. So we hope that Anna Lindh Academy can inspire and maybe also be invited in other conferences and so forth, so we can continue to present our findings, because I think we are onto something here that plays out in globally, actually. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your important points, because indeed we need to look at things from different perspectives. Art is one of those, definitely, and you showed how it can help also look at various challenges faced from a different perspective. Without further ado, I would like to go to move to the Q&A, and where I started earlier and ask Kirsten Tam to maybe reflect on the question that was put on the table by Louise Morley. First, there is this need for value-based leadership, but your question was really about what are women asked to lead, and as a leader of a university and of an organization like EWORA, you may wish to reflect on that quickly. And also there was another sub-question that was very important. Does representation change the paradigm, and really is that where we need to go? So Kirsten, maybe you would wish to reflect on that.
Based on my own experience as a leader for many years in academia, I would say that it's so important to learn to know your own values and norms, and to understand yourself to begin with, and also because you have so much power as a rector, so you really need to base all your decisions on based in your own understanding of values and norms, and so they must be integrated. So, for example, in my leadership position right now, I'm never make decisions that are not really integrated reflected and integrated with myself as a leader. So it doesn't matter if I'm a woman or not, I think, but it's so important really to reflect on this. And I think also the intersectionality, we should be better in reflecting and learning about how to analyze each situation, and really to because of course class it has always been very important in also the work for gender equality in society, I would say also, but we are not really. So, for example, at Malmö University, 2/3 of our students, 25,000 students, belong to the first generation academics. So that's why we also here, we always try to understand things from the lens of also this kind of, this group of students we have here. And we attract students coming from having this kind of backgrounds, and also our pedagogical approaches have been developed based on that, and so on. So really understand and reflect more on the values and norms integrated in everything you do. I would say that I have tried to do that, and also combine it with good leadership. And I think we need more qualitative research on this, because we need to. I've tried to find research focusing on this, but there is very little research. So I also, so of course we need facts and figures, but we also need to have an understanding-based or experience-based knowledge need to be identified, I think, and about these kind of phenomena, because it's quite complex. And I'm not specialist in these subjects. I'm a professor in occupational therapy, but I think rehabilitation science is quite close to gender equality, because that's also one important disability studies and so on is also one part of this intersectionality and human rights we need to better understand. So that was a little bit fluffy, I would say, but since I'm a rector, I'm always a little bit fluffy, I would say. So.
We love that kind of fluffiness. We do like a lot. No, I think you were not fluffy. I think it's really putting an answer on a very important point, how to address these issues of value-based leadership, and how then also to make sure that there is a kind of example setting when you are in a leadership position. But maybe
can I add one thing? I also agree really with Maria about the academic values. We have Magna Carta Universitatum and the academic values, and we always need also these kind of values should also be incorporated with the other norms and values. So I've also tried that, and I think it's very important for women, especially perhaps for female leaders in academia, because we need to really focus on the academic values and the integrity and legitimacy and so on in what we do, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Well, let me pick then on that last point that you make, especially women. I think that is something that Louisa Morley was also challenging.
Yeah.
Is there a different leadership role? Is there a different role for women or men leadership? How does that work? How can we deconstruct that? Maybe I will go to Patricia on women leadership, and then to Marisa, where we see that women are so much rocked and challenged, especially at these highly ranked institutions in the US, but in different parts of the country as well, and how that will then probably also leak onto other continents, because what's happening there, as Louisa Morley stressed as well, will happen somewhere else, no doubt. But when it comes to would there be a different leadership style if you're a woman or a man? Patricia, would you like to say something about that?
Okay. Yes. We did a new how can you say encuesta survey. We did a survey asking the people if they think the leadership of women is different than leadership of men, and most of the responses said that they are different because women are more careful and more subjectivities, and they all stereotypes. But the thing is that they prefer a new leadership with the women in the head, a head leadership with women. But the problem is that now we have a women president, but the leadership of this woman is horrible, because he's not democratic. He's anti-democratic, and also she and the prime minister has a lot of decision that disappear a lot of decisions that are against the progression of women develop, and also the poor people, and also the indigenous people, not only women, but also indigenous poor people. That means that, in summary, a lot of people wants to have a new leadership with women, but the reality is that the women that now is the leader of the Peru as our president is not an example of democratic government. No, and now we are fighting in the human rights court for this kind of power abuse. And this is the, is the first woman as a president, and her performance is really, really awful. And this is a problem for our cause.
Yeah, and I think that indeed that is really setting an example that then is countering any possible advancement. Would you like to react to that, Marisa?
Yeah, well, for starters, here in the United States, we've never had a woman as a leader. Although we have had the Speaker of the House and current Vice President. I do think there are perceptions of differences in style, and I'm kind of hesitant to say that there are, just because I don't like stereotyping. But certainly, the perception is that women are better communicators and more team builders, but there's a lot of misogyny in this country and a lot of hatred towards women being in leadership, and it's part of the reason why we've never elected a woman as president of the United States. It's an issue that resonates when we spill over into education, that there are still people who don't think women should be teachers, and religion, even though we have no official religion in this country, there are very strong religious views and values that still resonate with a lot of people, and they're trying to maintain that gender binary and male privilege. And they see women moving up, especially in education, as a threat to that, and that is one of the things that we are dealing with, politically and within the field of higher education.
Thank you very much. The time is ticking, and we lost a bit of time in transition to digital opportunities. So I hope that people can stay for another 6-7 minutes. Or 8, because 8 is the day of March 8th. So we could use that as an excuse to stay on just a little bit longer. Would you like to react to this in 1 minute, Louisa, as well? And maybe even Julia, from where you sit at the EWORA and Maria, 1 minute, because then there is the question that you could take at the same time, where Janet Herring is asking if EWORA and IAU could answer when women in academic leadership positions are challenged, and what would be our role as associations when it comes to that. So maybe we can take that as an extra question in there. What is the role of associations actually in advancing the issues that pertain to the topic of the day? So Louisa, maybe you would wish to react to, if 1 minute's okay.
Okay, well, I'm just pulling together what the amazing comments that my colleagues have made today. And I would remind us of glass cliff theory, when women are welcomed into leadership when the going gets tough. And an example in Britain is Theresa May for Brexit, when nobody wanted to touch it. So they allowed a woman in. There's also evidence that when you get a surplus, when you get good representation, it's sort of Bordeauxian theory, really, that the value goes if lower value social groups get access to anything, the value of the product, the position, whatever, drops. So in some of the early thinking about women in higher education leadership cited countries like Sri Lanka, for example, which have the first woman leader in the world, also had has had traditionally very high representation of women in higher education leadership. But why is that? Because the men want to go somewhere else. They want to go into the private sector and earn a lot more money. The same with a lot of Eastern European countries. So, you know, we've got to move beyond the simple quantitative analysis and look at the bigger social contexts, look at intersectionality, look at the policy context. And I mentioned neoliberalism very fleetingly, but this is the big issue, isn't it, in terms of higher education leadership?
Yeah.
That, you know, it's the purpose of higher education. How is that conceptualized? And what are the dominant priorities in all the auditing of higher education? And increasingly, it's about global competition. It's about finance. It's about profit. It's about in the innovation wars, etc. So, you know, we really must move outside this very narrow idea about a pipeline and people passing through it, and look at it more broadly in terms of what is the purpose of higher education and who is determining that, and what are we asking women to lead, and when are we asking them to lead it? Is it only when the going gets tough?
Very good. So I think we have our next webinar coming up on these important issues, because we're running late, but these are so important. And I cannot resist but also invite you to pencil down the dates for the upcoming IAU Global Conference in November to be hosted by Sophia University in Japan, where we will tackle these issues and also try and see what is it that a university stands for. How can we move also beyond the competition that's embedded in everything that we do today? How can we go beyond what is so-called innovation, but actually is leading back into time instead of moving forward? And how can we look at the values that are those that will help generate the grounds upon which to educate the citizens of tomorrow? So going back to these ideas and see why they don't resonate and why they're less sexy than pure economistic terms upon which to develop what is so-called high quality higher education. So many issues there. Thank you, Louisa, for putting them on the table. Julia, from where you sit and also the historical development of EWORA, do you see also a change, and do you see a changing role for an association like yours when it comes to facilitating dialogue on what it would mean for women to pick up, to and be pushed up the ladder and choose to move up the ladder for the right reasons?
I mean, considering all these discussions, I was thinking about definitely agreeing with Luis. We may focus more on intersectional experiences. I think intersectionality would be another concept we should work further on. I still believe women leadership can bring diversity, inclusivity into the work environment. But of course, our aim is to have this diverse representation at top levels. It's not only about women or men. I think I should briefly mention about giving much more voice to intersectional experience will be also important for our association, I shall say.
Very good. Yes. And so maybe, Kirsten, at the end, we'll want to get back to that and also see where this strategy would lead. Maria, would you like to react to this? 1 minute.
Yes, I'll be short. Well, I think Louisa said something very important when she mentioned Margaret Thatcher, because I see in Swedish politics now, we see like a full parade of small little Margaret Thatcher types, female leaders within politics, extremely feminine, I would say, but it feels like they are really like kind of held hostages by other forces. So I totally agree with what you're saying here on And I think that is also why we want to bring up the value-based leadership and go back kind of to the roots. Also, actually look at constitutions, because I totally agree that it's not, you know, the image that could tell us whether it's a good leader or not, or numbers in bodies, but very much content.
Yes, okay, thank you. That's very important. We see that in many countries, not only there, but also the fire squad idea of that, where you send in women where nobody else wants to go, is a very important one. Would you like 1 minute, Marisa, to say something? Patricia, 1 minute. Louise again, maybe, and then Kirsten, I give you the floor to close the session. We have not even half a minute, because we have to close at 38 in order to also allow people to listen until the very end. We have many good comments in the chat. Thank you so much to everyone who made contributions. We will write those down and also share those when we will share the recording of this webinar. So thank you very much for having given us input. There are other questions there that will merit a next webinar to come. So quickly, Patricia, I see you have your hand up. Half a minute, Louisa half a minute, Marisa half a minute, and then I go to Kirsten.
Well, thank you very much for the webinar. I really happy to be here. And finally, I think the intersectionality is very important for the higher education. In my city, there is a problem with racism and other forms of discrimination, and it's difficult to keep in mind the problem of intersectionality, the way that you can go through the intersectionality, and there is a lot of problems with the authorities. And then I agree with Luisa about the intersectionality and the things that you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me give the floor quickly then. What the order I've lost? So Marisa, half a minute.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I wish we had more time, especially to talk about these issues of intersectionality, in particular with regard to sexuality as well as race. These issues are really resonating politically here in Nashville, Tennessee, and around the country. You know, we don't know how much you're paying attention, although someone pointed out that what happens in the U.S. does get noticed around the rest of the world. I'm not sure if people here really understand or appreciate that, but thank you all for letting us know that. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this, and appreciate being a part of this wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Well, let me thank all the speakers for your valuable contributions. Without you, no discussion, and great points made. Louisa, and then Maria, and then Kirsten, you will be invited to close.
Okay, very quickly. I'll try and condense a 45-year career into half a minute. And what I would say is, let's move away from this binary thinking around men and women, women and men, black, white, gay, straight, etc. Let's try and move away from that and be a little bit more sophisticated and think about what are we working towards and what constitutes a gender-free university, not counting more women into male-dominated, patriarchal, neoliberal structures, but how can we disrupt those structures and move towards a gender-free higher education?
Nice plan. Kirsten, what do you say about that?
I think it's a very interesting and good suggestion. And I also think, since we all universities in the world, we are universal, so we have a lot of power if we can come together and have this as a goal. So I think that sounds very good. Louise, I think we should set goals together in this area. So that is very important. And thank you, all of you, for contributing to this very important discussion, and also for EWORA, we will use this in our coming strategy development for EWORA, and also we will. I think it's important to remember that we are the power we have as universal universities.
Yes. Thank you all for this great conversation starter. I think webinars are really that. I see that many people appreciated the conversation in the chat. We hope that the recording will travel far and that people will pick it up in order to engage with into further conversations with all of you wherever you are in the world today, in order to advance on these very important topics and plan ahead for a different kind of higher education that will help us move away from any just one size fits all system that does not allow for the full diversity to thrive and be involved. So thank you so much. Much more to be said. Great cooperation as always with EWORA, and thank you all the speakers for your invaluable time. It's very much appreciated. Not only your time, your ideas, and great inputs into further thinking on these important topics. So thank you, and hope to see you sooner than later in a different setting.